All right, so let me get started. We'll go through some of the introductory slides, and I think by the time all the people join, you'll be ready. So good afternoon or good morning, as the case might be in some places. Welcome to this month's edition in the Applied Analytics Success Stories series. My name is Rajesh Tyagi, and I'm the organizer for these webinars. Now, these webinars are an initiative of the Informed Practice session. So before we get started, let me spend a minute or two introducing you to the Informed Practice section. Beth, if you could turn the slide, please. Yes, so the purpose of this section is to advance the practice of analytics, operations research, and management sciences. And we have a number of activities to support that objective. So we have the 3 annual competitions, which are shown in the blue colored font. And then we have some monthly or bi-monthly activities as well. So we have the Applied Analytics Success Stories webinar, and that's the one where we have people talk about real world problems that they have encountered and how they have solved those problems. We have also just started a new series called Sustaining Outstanding Analytics Organization webinars, where we will have analytics managers come here and talk about their organization, the kind of projects that they work on. So both of these webinars will alternate every month. And then we also have a monthly virtual networking happy hour, sort of a little bit more relaxed setting. And this would be, the topic kind of varies month to month. And again, if you're interested in any of these webinars or happy hours, please go to the website and register for them. And if you like these webinars, we hope you will join the practice section. Next slide, please. Okay, so on to today's webinar. So we are very pleased to have Natalia Summerville from SAS here today. The title of today's presentation is OR for Social Good Practical Implementations. So we have Natalia, who leads the organization practice at SAS Institute that designs, develops, and implements operations research applications for a variety of industries, including retail, healthcare, transportation, manufacturing, and media advertising. Natalia has been teaching undergrad and master's level classes in industrial engineering, operations research, data analytics since 2005, and is currently a lecturer at MIT, Duke University, and North Carolina State University. She's deeply passionate about data for good movement and has been collaborating with many nonprofit and mission-driven organizations to implement data analytics for social good. Natalia is currently a board member within Pro Bono Analytics and doing good with good OR committees at Informs. Quick note before we get started, we will have a Q&A after the presentation. So there is a Q&A button that you will see in Zoom. And the viewers can submit the question while the webinar is going on. And at the end, Natalia will read through those questions and answer them. We typically have a networking event for 30 minutes after this, and we use it basically to continue the Q&A session. So consider this more like a 1.5 hour session. We'll finish the webinar within the hour and then continue with Q&A till 1:30. With all that, I would like to hand over to the speaker. All yours, Natalia.
Thank you so much, Rajesh. So first of all, I really appreciate the invitation. I'm honored to be here to talk to you guys about this topic I'm very, very passionate about. The way kind of we decided to organize it is I'm going to give a quick overview of 4 implementations that I find interesting. And we'll have a little bit of discussion on each one of them, and I can address more kind of detailed questions towards the end if you have on any one of these particular implementations. So let me go and share my screen. Okay. And can you please confirm that you see the one slide at a time?
I see the slide.
Wonderful. Thank you. Just I have a long monitor. Sometimes it messes it up. Okay, so the 4 implementations that I'm planning to talk about is WakeMed, Mother's Milk Bank, Durham Public Schools, Cleveland Clinic, and Boston Public Schools. They're ordered roughly by complexity, but there's kind of certain relevant points to each one of them as I go through the presentation. So I'm going to start with WakeMed. There. So the Mother's Milk Bank is an organization that collects donated breast milk from mothers who are able to do so. Those that collected breast milk obviously goes through a lot of testing process, pasteurization, and so on, and then they are able to place those that breast milk to, for example, NICUs where babies needed the most or older babies in need. A little bit about this organization: they have about 26 milk banks, mostly North Carolina, but some in Georgia as well. Last year, they had 330 new donors. As you can imagine, donors are temporary. They can only donate for a year or two. And then last year, they were able to dispense 400,000 NICU feeds. I'm particularly passionate about this organization. I have a personal connection to it. When my daughter was born a little over 3 years ago, we had some complications, and I was actually one of the beneficiaries. And there is a couple blogs that I have on my baby and kind of my experience. And since I went through that, once kind of things stabilized, I reached out to the manager of the organization and see kind of, okay, is there something I can do to support this wonderful organization? And ever since, so 3 years now, we've been working with my North Carolina State students, which I teach data analytics there every spring, and working with this organization as well as others, where we try to identify projects that might be relevant to the organization. So that's kind of how that partnership started. And basically every year we try to find something to support them. Now the project team, so those were my wonderful students. This project was 2 years ago, I believe. So I was overseeing their work, and Montana is my main partner at this organization. She's director of the manager of the milk bank. While I mentioned we have worked several projects with this nonprofit organization, this is my favorite one because it includes optimization. And something I kind of actually did not mention at the beginning is one of the things that I try really to focus on this particular presentation are data for good implementations that include operations research in them. There's a lot of data for good implementation that have more visualizations or data processing or even machine learning, but actually not so many that have true OR. So the problems that I'll be mentioning are true OR problems. So here we're talking about a facility location type problem. When we started working with them, they had 2 drop-off locations. So the mothers, they can drive to one of these drop-off locations and deposit their milk, their breast milk, or they can request a shipping box and ship it for free. So the average shipping distance in a year, for example, was about 11,000 miles, and it cost the bank about $40,000 in shipping. You can see a little bit the map of North Carolina and the different zip codes from where the donations come the most. So it's kind of spread out across mostly North Carolina in this case for the donations. So one of the questions that Montana posed was, should we place more drop-off locations to try to reduce our costs? $4,000, it's actually a strong amount for this organization. So can we do that? And of course, that's a facility location problem. So I was very, very excited to model it that way. Basically, the way students formulated is they try to identify where to open new drop-off locations while they're minimizing the shipping costs. Besides the basic kind of common sense constraints, we did add limitations on the donors are not expected to travel more than 12 miles. So if there is a location that is outside of 12 miles of that donor, then they will not travel there. And then there's maximum 15 drop-offs that can be opened. We did discuss with Montana adding a cost for opening a drop-off location, but she said that that's not necessarily how it works, because their drop-off locations, once we identify the zip code, they have a lot of partner organizations like urgent care clinics or even other branches of the same WakeMed hospital, where they can for free place just a location at the reception where the mothers can stop by. So it doesn't necessarily add extra cost for them. So at this point, it was not measured like that. They just said, okay, if let's say if we could place 15, where would we place them and how much will that save? So that's what Montana was looking for. In terms of complexity, tiny baby problem, very quick solve, used SAS solver for this. And the results is the solution students proposed was saving them about 50% of the costs. In the map, you can see the colorful zip codes is where the students decided to place the the model decided to place the drop-offs. Now, what happened in reality is that once we presented this, they were not able to follow it exactly in terms of kind of placing it in those particular zip codes, but they did. Because of this analysis, Montana presented this analysis, and they did open 6 new locations. And that has been, I don't have actually the number right now, but that has been saving them for 2 years now, the costs of shipping. So I truly love this example, because I feel many times in the operation result practice, we're looking for very fascinating, complicated modeling problems that motivate us from innovation perspective. But particularly for smaller nonprofit organizations that are just struggling to survive while providing some social good, social benefit, sometimes very small and models actually can make a big difference. So I truly love this problem. This problem was addressed by my undergraduate students, and it was helpful. So I love this example. Since I know I'm kind of skipping a lot of things, I do have these links that I'll figure out how to best share it to those who are interested. It was there was a couple of case studies posted on this, and you can always find a bit more information on any of these postings. And I'm checking on my time and moving to my next example. I was asked to kind of keep the questions towards the end. So if you have anything, you can just draft it or put it in questions and answers. And at the end of the call, I'll get there. Okay. Next one is Durham Public Schools. So Durham Public Schools is here in the area in North Carolina, and they have 53 schools, about 32,000 students, and last year they operated a budget of about $460 million. This project was executed in partnership with SAS and Durham Public Schools. We actually began this project with a wonderful intern of ours, Matt Fletcher, and this was last year. This project started during COVID, and as I'll address the problem definition, I'll be able to explain kind of why is it started during COVID. So Matt started this project, and then Subu from my team took it over, and we've had wonderful people supporting this with Rob and Michelle and others within the organization. And we had direct contact with the executive director of the planning, as well as the deputy superintendent, to try to see what can we do to help. As you can imagine, in terms of operations research, one of the issues that they were facing is we were talking with them started talking during summer, and then more towards September, October timeframe on how to reopen their schools for some face-to-face classes in fall 21. So they were planning to open, but they were instructed at that point to open about 50% room capacity. So their total population that we were looking at for this example was about 15,000, and obviously at room capacity it will be 8,000. So we need to find a way on how to schedule those students. And the school, Durham Public Schools, they truly believe that they would like to maximize the time that the students could spend face-to-face, because that will support them, particularly for elementary schools. So we focused on elementary schools. The younger kids, anyone who has younger kids, obviously the Zoom meetings for 8-year-old, 7-year-old is a very hard thing to go through. So they were trying to maximize that time. And that is an optimization problem, particularly scheduling. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to assign students or groups of students to times and rooms, classrooms. We had a multi-objective approach, which actually most of them are going to be multi-objective approaches, which is we're trying to maximize face-to-face, but also room changes. So what that means is, for example, if on Monday, if we decided to place a group of students on Mondays and Thursdays, ideally we're trying to keep them in the same classroom, just from logistics perspective. So that is something that we were asked to consider. Besides logical constraints, we also had constraints related to the physical space capacity as well as the social distancing. So we allowed the Durham Public Schools to interact with the system such that they could say, okay, I need 6 feet distance, I need 10 feet distance, 4 feet distance between the students, so they could actually play with it a little bit and create what if scenarios. So at a very high level, that is the problem formulation. Still, the problem was not very large, but it had much more complexity than the previous problem I presented. We had a little bit under 1,000 variables, binary variables, some continuous variables, and about 2,500 linear constraints. One of the things that was relevant for them is the what if analysis that I mentioned. So they wanted to have the capability of interact with the system and generate a schedule and take a look and modify their parameters and generate again without going to the code. So what we did is we built a web app for them where they could modify, they could visualize their data as well as modify their parameters. And I'm happy to talk about the technology behind this web app. Maybe if anyone is interested later in the question and answer. But so basically, this is a web interface where they had the chance to visualize the input data. And I know the letters are very small, so I don't intend you guys to read what is there. Just an example of a screen where they're able to input parameters, select a certain school, and then they push a button, it runs optimization, and then it generates the schedule. They're able to analyze the schedule, go back to parameters, and so on. So we had them interact with it. We created an image where they were able to go in, interact, and then I believe it was like later in November or early December, what happened is they were decided to go remote for the rest of 2021. And that was decision taken actually above the people who were working with. So while this kind of tool did help them to go through the analysis, at that particular semester, what we were looking, the face-to-face, they actually did become remote. Some of the schedules, they were used for analysis, as I said, but not for actual decision making. We do have a full mathematical formulation for those who are interested in these blogs. So the blog that is on the right, this is more a little bit high level problem, maybe at a level as I just discussed. And then we have this blog by Subu, who writes the formulation much more in detail, mathematical formulation for the problem. And then for those who are interested, this is a little video of that, kind of like a demo of the web app that we created for them, kind of going through the point and click. And that's all I had for Durham Public Schools. We're doing good on time. I am going to Cleveland Clinic. So, Cleveland Clinic is a very large organization that consists of several locations. They take on more than 2 million patients every year. They operated at 10 billion operating revenue in 2019, and they have about 26 locations. So we're going now into a very large organization. This is a very large organization with a wonderful data science team. So they are an organization that is a truly advanced in what they do with forecasting, machine learning, including optimization within their teams. They actually won the Annie Excellence in Analytics Award. This project was part of the submission, but not the only submission, because they have been working for years now to improve their operations through data analytics. So it was wonderful to work with them. While kind of in my day-to-day work, what my team does is we build optimization applications for our customers. This particular organization was unusual due to this kind of amazing data science team that they had. So we worked with several of those data scientists and directors, and this is the team, the SaaS team that worked on this project. So how this project came up was, again, this is during COVID. We're talking early April last year. And so they needed to implement one of the Penn State model, EPI models that was published in Python, and they had SAS, so they wanted to translate it to SAS as well as add some capabilities. So they engaged with us. So that was one part of the problem. And then once they kind of had those AP models to be able to understand a little bit on the expected flow of COVID patients, they wanted to see how can they use best their resources and when can they start reopening some of the elective services such that the organization can survive the crisis, right? To kind of help with the cash flow while being safe and keeping the patient care quality. So because during that time in April, they basically shut down all the elective procedures. So the resources they asked us to focus on was hospital beds, operating rooms, ICU beds, and ventilators. At the same time, we were asked to consider the COVID-19 tests. So again, this is back in April last year. Tests were very, very limited. So they were getting a certain amount of tests every day, some of them rapid, some of them non-rapid. And the patients, whatever patient will come in to the clinic for, let's say, an elective procedure, a cornea surgery, or they will need to be tested, as well as the expected flow of the COVID patients. So they needed to make sure that however they start reopening, they have enough of the resources as well as enough of the COVID tests. So the objective was to generate an optimal restarting plan while we're balancing that the hospital economics to kind of have them survive, and then efficient uses of resources. A little bit here on the hierarchy of the organization in terms of services that they offer, as well as their resources. So as I mentioned, they have several clinics or facilities, and each facility offers different types of services. So what we have here is the service level, and then we have the sub-services. So for example, orthopedics can offer sports appointments or joint surgeries. We were operating at sub-service level. So we were deciding to open or not open, and when to open the sub-service level. At the same time, some of the resources were shared for the service. So for example, for cardiac services, they all had cardiac beds, but neurology could not use cardiac beds typically. Operating rooms and ventilators were shared within a facility, and then COVID tests were shared across all the different facilities. So the problem formulation is a type of scheduling because we had phases. And so what we wanted to focus on is which subservices to reopen and when to reopen. And mostly the services made sense because COVID patient expected flow was different through time, but mostly the available COVID-19 tests were expected to significantly grow month after month. So we had forecasts such that, and I'm just putting numbers out there just in terms of there was like hundreds of tests available in May every day, but then they had thousands available in October. So that's why they kind of wanted to know in advance what would be the recommendation. And they asked to look at different financial metrics, revenue, as well as margins. Besides logical constraints, we had the capacity limitations on the resources that I mentioned earlier, as well as COVID-19 tests availability. More complex problem, we had about 200,000 binary variables, 400,000 continuous variables, and about 200,000 linear constraints. After some adding some algorithms to speed up the process and help performance, we were able to solve within a minute, which allowed us again to help them through a user interface because they also wanted to interact with it. And so this is obviously a pattern that we see here. Our customers there, they want to not only get a solution, but they want to get a solution, analyze it, modify parameters, push a button, and rerun. So that's what we did for them. This is a slightly different technology besides the app that we developed, but they were able to go into the app and look at their history, demand, and all kind of their input data. They were able to input a lot of the parameters, such as phases. When are they expecting to get more tests, and how many of those tests, and then what percentage of ICUs they want to use, and other type of parameters. I'm not going into much detail right now, but so they were able to create scenarios. They were able to create many scenarios, actually, push a button, and since the run is fairly quick, then they were able to look at the comparison between the scenarios and kind of analyze the reopening plan from a schedule perspective in terms of when are they planning to reopen, and when are we suggesting to reopen, as well as how will the resources be used. So that is a tool that was delivered to them, and we kind of closed this project about, I want to say, November last year, and they actually keep using it up to now. What we're calling post-COVID, which now is kind of feels wrong, but to understand further opportunities. So they're currently using it to understand further opportunities in terms of kind of where to offer different services and so on. So this was a wonderful, I mean, they're all wonderful projects, but this was a fantastic team at Cleveland Clinic that we worked with. One of the another things that is fantastic was that actually the three projects that I'm talking about that are not the Mindley State students, but the SAS project. SAS has a kind of strong organization, Data4Good, where we kind of partner with these organizations. And in this case, everything was publicly available. So there's a good GitHub repository that we agreed with Cleveland Clinic, since it's kind of joint IP, but we agreed to release. So there's a GitHub repository that has all the documentation on all the functionalities, including all the code available. And that was mostly because Cleveland Clinic really wanted, they consider themselves, and they are, a leader in analytics in health and health operations. So they wanted other organizations and other clinics that maybe don't have such a strong data science teams to be able to use it, what we built, and use it for free. So it's out there. We actually don't have kind of like a reference how much we know how much it was downloaded, but we don't know how much it was applied. but I thought it was wonderful from Cone Clinic that they wanted to share it with the world, basically. And there was also a webinar that there is, and in this webinar, if anyone is interested a bit more, also on the point and click interface that we had, the part 2 demo of this webinar is the one where I'm kind of walking through the details. So that is Cleveland Cleaning Project, and I'm going to move towards my last project, which is Boston Public Schools. So you probably have heard Boston Public Schools has many projects going on with different organizations. They are always very interested in kind of improving their operations through the use of advanced analytics and operations research. They have about 125 schools, 53,000 students, and operated about a $1 billion budget. So this project, I'll talk a bit more, but it's about monitor optimization. So monitors are people who are assigned to students that have special needs to ride the buses with them. So we worked directly, are working actually directly with the transportation department. So our main contacts there is Angela Zhang and Emmanuel. They have been wonderful as well to work with. And on the right, you have our team from SAS. So we've been working with them since 2019. And the main problem description here is that, as I mentioned, there are students that have needs, special needs, and therefore they will have a special type of monitor that need to ride with them in the bus. And there's different types of monitors. Some students will need monitors that are assigned just to one-on-one, and some students with special needs will need monitors that can ride with 5 of these special needs students. So basically they can, there are 3 different types of monitors. So one of the inputs to us is the routing. So the routing is already generated, and we get about 3,500 routes, about 625 buses for the 3,500 routes, and we have about 1,300 student need monitors. So this is 2019 data, okay? Some keys that make this problem more complicated is that you don't assign a monitor to the full route. You can assign a monitor to a partial route. So monitor can change at one school and then wait for another route and go. So they can kind of jump and switch buses. As I mentioned, there's different type of monitors, and how Boston Public Schools works is they have a team that typically for about a week work almost 24/7 to generate, so like actively building in Excel this what they call packages. And packages are basically sets of routes that a monitor will be bidding on. So for example, there can be, it's literally like a PDF document that says, okay, well, one monitor can have this 6 to 8 routes. And the idea is that for monitors' benefit, we want to have the packages as complete as possible. So monitors don't want to run 2 routes and then maybe wait for 3 hours and get another package. So they want to have those packages as full as possible, and for many, many other reasons. They need it for the association reasons, for insurance and benefits, and many reasons. So we wanted to allow the monitors to have as comfortable as possible schedule, but as full schedule as possible. So that is what we were attempting to do. So the idea is to assign these routes or pieces of route to the packages. And there are several objective functions where we're trying to maximize the number of routes per package, but we also want to minimize the transfers. So while they can transfer, we want to minimize those transfers because that's not as comfortable for the monitors, and also minimize monitor changes across, actually it's within weeks, what I was trying to say. Because, for example, if there is a student that needs a monitor on Monday, Tuesday, and Thursday, or Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, for example, then we ideally want to have one monitor the 3 days. That's not always possible, but we try to minimize those monitor changes for that student that maybe is building a relationship. Main constraints is we try to cover all students that require a monitor. Well, we have to. By law, they have to cover all the students that require a monitor, have to have a monitor. And then the monitors need to come back to the same yard. As you can imagine, the monitors ride their car or the public transportation. They stay and then they ride the routes, come back, and then go to their homes. So it has to be back to the same route yard. That is a large problem. So that is the complexity is about 10 million variables, 2 million constraints. And as of now, the runtime is about 41 minutes. And when I say that at this point, this is actually a problem that we have been solving sequentially through different types of formulation. Honestly, this is like a large conversation on its own. And this is one of the most complex problems we have actually worked on. The first, sometimes I call it naive MILP approach, obviously didn't do well, where we just tried to create a MILP there. So we have some wonderful people from an organization there that were trying to kind of make it a bit more tractable and improve the performance. So basically, the key here was to model it through network flow, and eventually we end up modeling it as assigning the kind of the nodes, having the routes as the nodes, and assigning monitors to the routes through a network formulation problem. And so it was used as integer multi-commodity network flow, and then some other solves later. So it was completely not a MILP, it was reformulated, but we're able to solve it in about 41 minutes. Status. So we did this in 2019. We created a set of packages for them, and that was the first time that we were creating those. While they didn't use the full solution we provided, there was one type of monitors that they did use our input. So it was probably for about 20% of the monitors, but that's where they did use our input. And then we understood kind of the challenges and how to improve it. We took their feedback, and then COVID happened, so they didn't have this. We didn't have this effort last year in 2020. But as of right now, actually, like the last 2 days, we just got the routes for the next year, and now we're running and adjusting. Running and adjusting for the for next year, to hopefully validate, take their input as soon as possible, because we have 1 week. Of course, they were very, very impressed the fact that we're even able to generate packages in 41 minutes, while it was taking them weeks in Excel. But of course, that makes sense with operations research. That's that I just mentioned, and currently working on generating the packages. There is a video that Nambaruna, and this video talks a bit more into detail on those approaches that I mentioned, in terms of the kind of how we're actually able to solve it. Honestly, that is fascinating. If you're interested, I will really kind of invite you to look at that video. Okay, so these were the 4. I know it's like it goes very quick. I just gave an overview. I did want to spend a few minutes on a particular kind of conversation on how to engage. Oops, that's not how it had to look, but how to engage. So as I was mentioning, let me go back here. As I was mentioning earlier, there's actually a big benefit that we as Analytics Society can provide to organizations through sometimes very basic applications, and sometimes through massive, complex mathematical formulations, which of course we love because they are challenging. I have been looking for a couple of years now into particular operations research applications for Data4Good, and there is actually not as many, as I mentioned. So what I did wanted to have a conversation a little bit is on kind of how, if anyone, if you or any of your students or anyone asks, how could they engage with this movement that over the last couple years have been really taking on this data for good movement. So the data doing good with good OR informed student competition. It's actually, up to my knowledge, the only organization or competition that particularly asks for operations research applications. They usually have submissions in May. I'm actually in the committee. We are going through the applications for this year. But if you have students, we would really like to have more applications next year from all type of universities across the world. And submissions will be around May 22. So there's actually time right now to kind of prepare and think. Some of those submissions are outstanding. I was so shocked, honestly, seeing these graduate students, just doing these amazing applications. Just very motivating, and I wanted to kind of put it out there. The other one is, of course, at Informs, the Pro Bono Analytics Committee. So what we do there is we get requests for nonprofit organizations for help. And then we do kind of some scoping. And then there is an email list that if you're interested to volunteer, you sign up for the email list. And whenever we have a project, we submit, you will get an email with kind of the project description, and then you can apply as a volunteer. We have a selection process together with the nonprofit, with the volunteers, and then we kind of guide and oversee at a high level, if you will, the project. But there are some wonderful projects happening within the Pro Bono Analytics. And I do have, this is a shameless plug in here, but we are currently getting volunteers there for an amazing organization that's called Kaboom. So it's very close to my heart as well, because what they're doing is they're trying to understand the play space equity for kids. So locations across major cities and smaller cities, is it equity, and where should more play spaces, safe play spaces, be built for kids? So this is where there will be actually a facility location component to it, optimization, but also a lot of geographical data, GIS processing, and so on. So we're currently collecting through Sunday volunteers, and I have talked to this organization. They are wonderful, and we're going to start from 5 cities right now, and San Francisco is actually one of them, and then we're going to expand. They actually want to expand to nationally to kind of roll over this analysis. So very exciting. Anyone who's interested, we're still getting applications through Sunday. Okay, data science for good. This is also a wonderful organization that University of Chicago started, but they kind of have it now across with other organizations and other universities, many of them in the UK. And one of the programs that I really love from them are this summer intensive internships, if you will, that they have. So they find organizations, and you can volunteer. Well, actually volunteer, but I think there is a pay actually as a mentor for 12 weeks. And before COVID, I think the project was actually in London. And then they have students who can apply. So the students learn, as you can imagine, intensely during those 12 weeks, and then mentors have a chance to contribute. And they were doing that every summer. Last summer didn't happen. I don't think it happened this summer, but I'm hoping that they will start that again. They also have an organization within that's called Solve for Good, which is very similar to what we do at Pro Bono Analytics. They have companies or nonprofits that apply. And one of the ones that is requesting volunteers to apply is Help Mom. And I read about it. It's also really motivating. It helps. They're asking for data analysis to understand and reduce maternal and infant mortality in Nigeria. So if you read about the organization, it sounds wonderful as well. And they are currently asking for volunteers. DataKind is one of the largest organizations. Actually, they've been for over 10 years, I believe now. They also do tons of wonderful things. You can go on their website, apply. They have this weekend hackathons to solve some of the social issues problems. And then the analytics for a better world. So this is also a webinar that, well, they have a webinar. They also now do more than a webinar, but they started from a webinar. So Dr. Bertimus and Dan Hertogs, they organize this analytics for a better world. And they also have some of the wonderful projects there. And you can, if you go on their website, you can see the projects that they have worked in terms of data for good. So I did want to spend some time here in terms of if anyone got motivated to kind of do some of these things. This has some of the wonderful organizations out there. Before I close, I have a community request. For a while, I've been looking for LP applications, practical implementations for social good. As you could see in my projects that I described, they're all MELPs. And that kind of ties back to my in my experience as a practitioner. Pretty much 90% of operations research applications that we do for customers are MELPs, like in my 10 years of practicing this. So we rarely see true LPs in practice. And I'm really motivated to find an application, not a research project, not something that could be done, but actually was done with an organization, with a nonprofit that is purely NLP. If you have any knowledge, it doesn't have to be a published article, just an organization that I can reach out and talk. I'm just collecting that information. That will be super helpful. So please, I will absolutely love if you're able to send me that email. And that's all I had. There's also my information. I'll be happy to connect with anyone. And I'm going to go to the questions, which I see we have several now. So thank you so much for your time.
Hey, Natalia, if you can give me a minute.
Oh, absolutely.
Before
Sorry.
you proceed with the questions.
Yeah,
no, absolutely. Yeah. So first of all, I just wanted to remind the audience, the video of your presentation would be posted in about a week's time, so they can see all these links. That you have posted. They should be able to see it there. Go to that video and check out all those links. I also wanted to mention that going forward, all webinars from the practice section which have women speakers will be co-hosted with the Women in ORMS forum. Again, that helps with cross publicity and everything. And Olga Perdikaki, who's the president for that forum, will talk a little bit about their organization on our October webinar. So we hope this partnership will continue. Let's see, and there was one question amongst those questions which related to me. And so I'll answer that before you can go with the rest of the questions, if that's okay with you. So the question was from Shiba Pathak. Do we need to be a member to attend any of those webinars? And the answer is no. Anybody can attend these webinars, but we do hope that you will become a member of the practice session. We are especially looking really for the student members, because they bring new energy, a different perspective to our organization, and in return, I guess they get to work with people who have done a lot of good work as professionals throughout their career. So this is a win-win kind of a proposition. So again, we hope that anybody who is on this call and they are interested in joining this section, again, just to be able to participate in other committee work, other initiatives, please reach out to me and we'll get you started engaged with the practice session. Please go ahead, Natalia, with the questions.
Thank you, Rajesh. Thank you. Thanks for jumping in. Okay, I'm just kind of going to go in order here. Okay, so Shiba is asking in terms of candidates for doctorate in OR, and I'm assuming that has to do with internship. I know I mentioned one of our interns started working with us on the Durham Public Schools project. So my organization at SAS, we have a really great program for interns. We actually have interns all the way from undergrad, but particularly in my group, we mostly have PhD interns. Those positions usually open around November. So if you go on the website, there are opportunities there. And we do have a high amount of interns. And something that I also think it's great is we tend to stay long with our when we hire our PhD interns during summer, we want eventually to keep them and transform them to full time. And many of the people on my team actually started as interns. This kind of how we like investing in each other. So if you're interested, I will definitely invite you to look at the website, SAS website, for in about November. That's when they post those. I'm gonna go. Some of the was asked, what are some of the strategies can be used to eliminate bias, if any, from the optimization models? I think that's a wonderful question, and it's a very current question. In this particular projects, we did not have any kind of bias modeling incorporated, since we didn't have actually any type of like gender or race information in any of them. But I definitely, so I don't have a clear answer on this. Besides, we did not implement that. While I do think it's always relevant to think about that. So I think that's a great question. Maybe not so applicable to this project, but definitely as practitioners, we always have to have that in mind. Federico, so about the computer hardware that was used and the solvers. So the students, the Motors Milk Bank, they use the free SAS. It's called SAS on Demand for Academics. So that's just a free version of SAS online. You don't have to download it, and that's solved really quickly. That's a small problem. The rest of them, let me think. Yes, the rest of them were solved in Unix servers. I will need to check. I think it's about, Federico, I owe that to you. Okay, I don't remember exactly the size of the and the specifications. I just know they were Unix servers, and we used SAS for all the projects. But I owe that to you, the exact configuration of the server. There's a question regarding health record management at Cleveland Clinic. So we did not have any patient data in terms of clinical data. I do know that we have another customer actually right now where I can talk about publicly actually. We're working with UNC Health, and now, in their case, clinical data is extremely sensitive. So we have to go through a lot of processes to be able to make sure that it's treated in a secure way. However, particular for Cleveland Clinic, all we were getting is just numbers in terms of how many COVID patients are they expected to have, but there is no sensitive PII type of information there. I hope that answers the question. There is a question on so did I jump? How do these departments interact with each other databases to manage e-records? Bhargav, I'm not sure if you're able to talk. I'm actually, which project is that specific to each project? Rajesh, can folks talk, or should we maybe leave that question for later? When what is the preference? I guess
maybe you can leave that for maybe you can leave that for later, and
okay,
and maybe Bhargav can clarify that question if necessary.
Thank you so much.
And if you can perhaps go through the rest of these. Yes.
So when we have the chatting session, I think they will open the microphones. I'd love to interact with that question. I'm just not exactly sure which project were you talking about. Okay, Shiba, how do you handle several objective functions in a case of Boston Public Schools? How we usually handle them across many of the practical implementations that we have, which, by the way, pretty much all of them have multiple objectives. When you talk to a customer, it's never like they want one thing, they always want several things. We usually have a staged approach where we solve for one objective, and then we add some sort of a bounds or tolerance and resolve, bounds and tolerance and resolve. So it's not a true multi-criteria approach and in the sense that we solve it all at the same time, but we solve it sequentially, establishing tolerances. That's how we've been kind of approaching. So, which does mean that we need some sort of a importance a priori. And Rajesh, are we able to share? How can I share the presentation? Is that something that's typically done, or kind of how should I best do that?
Usually we post the video. Maybe let me follow up on this one.
Yeah,
Okay.
just because I had a bunch of links, I'm kind of hoping that folks are interested to go into the links and these organizations. So if I'm able to share, I'd love to share that.
Definitely some of the links we can separately attach.
Okay, I can do that.
Once we put your presentation and as part of the past webinars, I'm sure we can add some of the links there.
Okay.
But if you want to share all your slides, I think we'll figure something out.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Thank you, Rajesh. Vaide, okay. Could you please elaborate a bit on the interface design and the approach of the team in building them? How much of the project time usually goes into the interface, and how detailed is it typically approached? That's a wonderful question. So, and that again, that was in two of these projects, but also in my experience, many of our customers want some sort of interface. The first that I presented, which was Durham Public Schools, that's a web app. So it's using HTML and it's using JavaScript and React framework. And then from the backend, it's able to call CAS actions, and CAS is a SaaS cloud offering, basically. So it's using open source technologies to create the interface, the user interface, the UI. And the design, and then it calls SaaS from the backend. So that is the web app technology on the Durham Public Schools. And then for Cleveland Clinic, that is a different technology. So the one I shared, that is a visual analytics solution that SaaS offers. So it's a visualization, interactive visualization tool. But within that interactive visualization tool, you load the data and you're able to build plots, but you also have capabilities of building some parameter inputting. So like, I'm sorry, I'm phasing out here. Yeah, a way to input the parameter, like an HTML page. You can input the parameters through there, and it's called job execution. So those are the different. The web app was through HTML and JavaScript, and the Cleveland Clinic was through Visual Analytics and SaaS. And in terms of time, how much time does it usually go into the interface? That's a great question. It does. So for the web app, the good thing is we have that framework. We actually, within my team, we have about 10 of those demos now. So it's a little bit easier. The first time we had to build one of them, it took several months. But nowadays we're able to do that a little bit quicker because the framework is already there. And then the visual analytics one also takes, I want to say, maybe a couple weeks nowadays because it's already kind of pre-built for you. Can you indicate for each of the projects which of them received funding from the clients versus SaaS or students doing the work for free? Wonderful, love it. Okay, so the first project was my students, so there was no payment at any time, and the students used the SaaS free version. The second project was Durham Public Schools. It was for free, so customer didn't invest anything. It was part of that SaaS organization that's called Data4Good. So we engage with nonprofits, offering them free support. The third one was Cleveland Clinic. That was part of COVID-19 initiatives at SaaS, which was also for free. Now they did have a SaaS license, but all the model building and all the services basically that we provided, that was also for free. And then Boston Public Schools that I just mentioned, that's part of the Data4Good initiative for SaaS. And it's also, we had a 2-year engagement with them for free. So actually none of the projects there was any money exchange, and students did it for free as part of my final project in their class. And then, okay, follow up on the question of bias. What role did non-expert stakeholders play in problem formulation for any of your projects? Worker affected by plans, policies, parents, students, community advocates. Great. Okay, so let me think. And I'm going to try to pick the project that will apply the most, because in Mother's Clinic, Mother's Milk Clinic, it was just with the stakeholders. The Durham Public Schools, it was just with the stakeholders, but they at the same time had feedback from parents. So they will be meeting with parents. Now here, interesting, Boston Public Schools. For Boston Public Schools, the monitor associations is actually very, very strong. So when Boston Public Schools comes up with a set of schedules, they definitely need to get the impact from the monitors and get the suggestions from monitors on changes. So while we did not interact directly with the monitors, their feedback is really key for the success of the project. So I think that one is an example. That's a wonderful question. Thank you, Michael. And then Shiba, do you think an OR professional is slowly marrying into skills that a coder will typically have? What would you advise to learn apart from optimization and mathematical programming? Okay, so I guess there's different, I guess in my mind, different OR professionals. So for example, because some of them actually come from computer science background, and I will definitely consider that coding is key. While you could just be able to formulate the problem, which is an experience on its own, because to formulate the problem, you have to be able to interact with the customer and have that mental translation of the business need into math, which by the way is my favorite thing of all the practice, which is kind of listening to people who have no idea about OR and writing a mathematical model with what they're saying. That's fascinating. But you actually have to be able to code it. So I will definitely suggest kind of computer science techniques, coding, and nowadays, I mean, machine learning is starting to integrate more and more. And last thing I'm going to mention is forecasting and machine learning tends to be a strong input into optimization. So many times when we are working on optimization problem, there was already a forecasting problem that was formulated. Even for example, for Cleveland Clinic, they first had a forecasting problem with the epi models to know how many COVID patients are coming. Once we have the forecasts, then we do optimization. So that is very often. So I think an overview of forecasting time series could be helpful for our practitioners as well. I think I went through most of them, and I do think maybe it's we can open the session now, and so everyone kind of will have open microphone, and we invite more questions or any type of conversation. Is this a good time, Rajesh?
Yes, absolutely.
Wonderful.
Yeah, Beth, if you could open those mics, please.
Okay, and I'm just gonna stop sharing.
And one question, I guess, while we wait for any other questions, you talked about opportunities for the students in terms of data for good kind of applications. What are the opportunities for others? Maybe people who have retired or people who have full-time jobs and just want to do some volunteer work in OR or related fields.
Absolutely. So those are actually like the 5 organizations that I put in the slide. Let me go back just because I think that's a wonderful question that you asked. Hold on. Oof. Not now share again for whatever reason. Sorry. Let me go here and let me share this again. Share, and I want to get here. Okay. No, that's not this one. Okay, so oops, sorry about that. Okay, so this one is for students. The rest of them is not only for students. So for example, we have a lot of volunteers who are professionals who want to also make a difference in the world with their skills, which I found wonderful. So a lot of our volunteers are not students, are professionals. And similarly in data science for social good, the projects, kind of like the more experience you have, the better. And while it is wonderful to have students apply so they can learn, the more experience you have, the better impact you're going to make. And so usually what we can also like is when we get these volunteers, we pair them maybe a very experienced person from the industry together with a student so they kind of learn And so definitely these two organizations, as well as Analytics for a Better World, I think it's mostly kind of, there's a lot of research projects going on, but this is, and as well as students within the universities. And DataCon is open to everyone, to students as well as professionals. DataKine actually has a full-time open position right now for data scientists, which is very unusual for DataKine, because DataKine mostly relies on volunteers, but this is a paid position. So this is for someone if they wanted to do this for a living. They, as of now, so yesterday, they had an open position, Rajesh.
Very good. Thank you. I think the mic should be open. Anybody else with any questions?
Hi, Natalie. Am I audible?
Yes. Hi.
I'm Bhargav from Duke. I think my question to you was regarding the Cleveland Clinic,
Okay.
which is essentially that so suppose there's a cardio department which is involved in cardio surgery, and there's a department which is involved with COVID testing. So now, how do these departments in practice, in status quo, interact with each other's databases in order to, in order to solve the optimization problem that your web apps do? So
Yeah.
how does a person in the cardio department who's involved in strategy or who's involved in optimizing gets access to databases to other departments which are important to make decisions?
Okay, so that's a great question. I understand it now. So actually, they have a centralized base of information, and the decisions that we were supporting, they were part of the data science team, the planning team. So these are not decisions that the cardiology department itself was making. So let's say cardiology department was not saying, "Oh, I'm going to open on June 15th. I'm going to start reopening some of my services." That is not, they did not have the capabilities to make that decision. It had to be made at the higher level within Cleveland Clinic. So the higher level executives were requesting the data science team to do this analysis and then kind of evaluate with the departments. So the data is centralized, fortunately, and then it was provided to the data science team and directors, and they communicated to the executives, who then communicated to the departments. Did I answer? Is that what you were looking for?
A follow-up on that would be, so as a database, do these clinics use Hadoop, or do they use virtual servers, or what exactly is the database in these clinics?
They had AWS.
Oh, all right. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Hi, I'm Sheba. Usually in the case of sustainability, we more well versed with only carbon ratings. So do you think there's an algorithm that we can come up in terms of an optimal sustainable supply chain? And what kind of parameters do you think we'll have to look at?
Can you explain the problem again? Supply chain for what? I think I missed the word there. Do you mind just kind of
usually companies these days are hell-bent on the jargon of sustainability and supply chains, but it's usually just limit to carbon rating and footprints and some CSR initiatives. So do you think there are any optimization problems that we could come up with and come up with an algorithm that could actually define what a sustainable supply chain should be, and what are the kind of parameters do you think that could go into it?
Yeah, absolutely. That's now actually, yeah, you were talking about carbon footprint. So there will be, so Informs actually has an initiative now that's called Analytics Collections, and we are publishing one that is Data4Good for climate change. And there is a couple of very interesting papers there. And while out of the 30 papers, not all of them are operations research, but some of them are. So I actually can send you links to some of those papers that I found that maybe that is helpful, as well as that analytics collection will be coming out in the next few months or something. But so yes, there's definitely in general, supply chain is a very classic industry for network type of problems implementation, but particularly for carbon print food, there are several papers that were very interesting. So I'm happy to send those to you.
Thank you.
And again, I guess in a week or so, once the final presentation is there, Natalia, if you can send us some of these links and
I'll send that.
We'll figure out.
Yeah,
We'll figure out a way to post it all there.
Perfect, thank you. And this is an analytics collection that will be coming also. So I'm assuming Inference will be sending that is Data4Good for climate change. So there are several kind of very cool. This is another shameless plug in there, but there are also kind of like games for classroom for kind of data analytics as well as operations research, but focused on climate change. So pretty cool.
In the case when data is very limited, would you recommend any assumptions to be made, and to what level should these assumptions be made?
Okay, so when we talk about limited data, many times that has to do, at least in my experience, mostly with predictive modeling. In general, in optimization, what we do is we do mathematical formulation of the problem. So kind of rules as well as objectives is key. So I have not run into as much issue with data, I guess, with optimization applications as I have building forecasting or modeling techniques. So for example, one of the projects that we're currently working with UNC, we're looking at COVID patients, deep lung environment, and they did some omics, which is biological data, and they only had 33 patients for that. So we're trying to make sense of those 33 patients versus 3,000 variables. So that's where you start using machine learning techniques and dimensionality reduction, as well as there is also techniques now to create synthetic data through GANs, for example. So those are, I guess, some of the things that are possible when you have very limited data. But I guess that's mostly kind of more applicable when you're trying to predict based on limited data, if that makes sense.
Any other questions? Any comments about this webinar series, or what you would like to see in future? What kind of presentations you would like to see?
Hi, Natalia. Can you elaborate on the integer multi-commodity network flow just once again for clarity's sake?
Yeah. Definitely. So I will definitely recommend looking at the video, and that's why we'll make sure to send it. But the idea is that we are formulating it as a network flow model where the monitors are assigned to, so the nodes are a set of routes. And so that's a little bit counterintuitive because first we were thinking the nodes will be the stops, right? But then we formulate it as the nodes will be set of routes, so pieces of those, the legs, if you will, and those are being assigned to the monitors. And first we have a solve that all it does, it minimizes the number of monitors. By minimizing the number of monitors, we're maximizing the size of the package, right? So we minimize the number of monitors, but then that solve goes very quickly. But then through that solve, we only get a number saying, okay, 500 monitors. But then those monitors, actually, we need to reassign them back. So there's 2 more network flow problems that we solve them. I do think I had my wonderful colleague Rob there. Rob, if you're still around, do you want to add a little bit to that? If you had anything, I'm not sure if he's around still. I thought he was. Maybe not. That is so, and there's definitely a video if you wanted to look a bit more into the formulation, but basically there's 3 sections, 3 solves that we did that, and that is the one that runs for 41 minutes.
Natalia, this is Michael Johnson. May I ask a question?
Of course.
Thank you. Earlier in your presentation, you provided names of a number of different initiatives that you said are generally aligned with your mission of using data to help improve decision making for public good. And one of the organizations you mentioned was Data Science for Public Good. I'm aware of a number of initiatives in the computer science, AI, data science space. You are as well. And I was wondering if you could clarify for us how you understand those who come from the perspective primarily of computer science and AI tend to understand the problems that we're all interested in ways that are a little distinct from operations research.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess, and I'm gonna try to answer that and let me know if that's what kind of you're looking for. But in terms of my kind of personal interest, right? My background is in operations research. So when I started getting interested in data for good, and kind of like after working with like large multinational for years, I was kind of like, hey, this can help some maybe for social good, right? So I was very, very interested in getting into using operations research for social good. But I didn't find many organizations that will like pro bono type organizations that will focus on operations research. And then many of those organizations are more, if you will, like computer science or machine learning or data analytics. Of course, what matters at a larger scheme, in my opinion, is that we're making a difference, right? And I mentioned that with the WakeMed example, that's a tiny, super simple model, and that was very helpful for them. So it doesn't matter how complicated the model is. At the same time, also in my opinion, I do find operations research, I believe that's the final echelon in data analytics. We can have a lot of data processing and visualizations and forecasting and machine learning, but optimization is the one that actually gives you the right decision that is much more actionable. Results are actionable from optimization. So that's why I'm kind of particularly motivated in getting more nonprofits to benefit particularly from optimization, because the suggestions are so clearly actionable versus more kind of data analytics approaches. But that is also very, very kind of personal preference, I think, and the bigger scheme is just kind of bringing the support. Did I answer this right, Michael? Is that kind of what you were looking for, or did I went completely different way?
No, this is fine. Thank you very much.
Of course. Thank you, Michael.
Madam, may I ask a question?
Absolutely.
Yes, madam. I wanted to know, I'm a PhD student working in working capital management, so in finance. So can I I wanted to write some case studies or something like that. So can you propose something like some optimization model, something rough idea about how can we go about it?
Anil, I'm sorry, I'm really struggling listening. It was kind of very cut. Do you mind trying that again, or maybe even writing it?
I will type it.
Okay, thank you so much. It was kind of cutting, and I'll make sure I'm looking in the chat for that question. I'm sorry about that. I struggled listening. And I think Irv, did you have a question?
Yeah. So I have more of a business question. So you work for a SaaS, which is a for-profit company.
It is.
So as you look at these opportunities, SaaS has a business decision of whether they try to sell software and services to the client versus putting it in the Data for Good initiative, which offers those software and services for free. So how does SaaS as a business make the decision of what they decide to do for free versus what they decide to do for pay?
I think that's a wonderful question, and it's probably above my pay grade at SAS. but most of the projects that I am involved, they also have some sort of within the SaaS Data for Good, they do have an R&D innovation type of thing. So for example, Boston Public Schools is a great example. It's a super complicated problem. So I believe that there is this synergy with SaaS R&D, for example, where we're learning as we're solving these super complicated problems while creating that benefit. So at the same time, there is a specific group that kind of decides which organizations, when they approach us, or sometimes we approach actual organizations, kind of are they the right fit for the Data for Good program or not. So I'm sorry if I'm not more specific, just because those decisions are made kind of above me, and for sure SaaS is for-profit organization. But I have seen wonderful synergy, and that's why I'm sure organizations as SaaS and others for-profit are interested, just because we learn from them and then we get to talk about them. One of the things, Irv, is that I have worked using optimization for my customers for 10 years now, and I cannot talk much about what I do because most of it is IP, and most of it my customers don't want me to share that information, right? So, and while, for example, the Cleveland Clinic, the fact that we could place our code there, I can't tell you how excited we were because we don't get to do that because we work for a for-profit organization. So I think there's a lot of kind of synergy and interest there. I think I answered partially. I'm sorry about that.
No, that's fine. I gave some insight. Thanks.
Hi, I'm Maria Silverheart, and I wanted to ask a question that was kind of similar to that. I am local to the RTP area, and I was around helping SAS and DataKind when they did a data dive a couple years ago.
Oh, I was there. Yeah, that was awesome.
Yeah, so thank you so much for connecting with me on LinkedIn, and I appreciate you sharing what you're doing. It's really exciting, and I think it's really important. So my question was just kind of similar to the last one. It was because I'm very interested in the partnerships and the partnerships that develop programs like this. So I just wanted to know if it was like you that had personally went and tried to develop these partnerships with like Boston and Cleveland, or were they something that was kind of handed to you, or how did those partnerships form?
Absolutely. I can mention real quickly. So the Mother's Milk Bank, I went and found the manager, right? And I spoke to her and I said, I have the students. So that was basically like me reaching out. Then Durham Public Schools, we had a contact. So that was more of an idea that came out from our group. And we had our intern, Matt, he was working with us, and we were thinking about, okay, well, this is a problem that's going to be coming up, how the schools reopen. We love scheduling. And then we had a connection that was made with our group and the Durham Public Schools, the planning director. And basically, yes, in that case, we approached them. And then we approached it, like in terms of my team, we also approached the Data4Good at SAS, and they accepted that project. Boston Public Schools was first a partner of SAS in this Data4Good effort. And then I also had a group of students work with them, and then the monitor optimization came out of there. And obviously that's not a student problem. So we just kind of continued that partnership. And Cleveland Clinic is a customer of SAS. So they did have SAS license. That makes them different. But then during COVID, they said, hey, we need help with this. And then they did that partnership where we did all the work for free. So it's different, but now I'm kind of thinking, yeah, many of them are projects that we consider interesting. We reach out to the organization, reach out to the Data4Good organization, and then see, can we kind of pair those out. Honestly, personally, what I also do is I really try, because I talked about the operations research, some of the kind of major projects, but I have many more kind of also simple projects that my NC State students work on. And I find that very helpful as well. Maybe they are kind of less complicated mathematically, but it's still helpful. We work with local animal shelters, local food bank, and those organizations, I literally approach them every fall semester and talk, hey, is there something, maybe some new questions that we can help in spring, and this type of thing.
Thank you so much for answering my question.
Mm-hmm, of course.
Hi, I'm Sheba again. On the Boston Public Schools case, I had a question regarding what happens if the monitors are unavailable, or they have an exigency and there's an emergency, they're not available to go ahead and have the schedule. So is there a backup of monitors kept in the pipeline, or and how does the algorithm take into account this?
It doesn't. So our algorithm just creates the packages at the beginning of each semester, actually academic year. Academic year and summer, and then they have to. I actually I'm not sure, but what I believe happens is they kind of help each other. Like, okay, can you cover my shift, this type of thing. But we don't re-optimize. This is an optimization that only happens once a year.
All right. Okay.
Okay. Yeah, that gentleman did type the question. I think it's too general. It basically says, can you let me know how I can use optimization and other methods in the area of finance, economics? I don't know if you want to answer that. I think that's too general. Somebody can just look it up on internet, really.
Yeah, probably I will suggest kind of doing some research. There are many. I guess like the first one that comes to mind, like a textbook example in finance for particular for operation research is portfolio optimization. So I guess that is something if you wanted to look at it, it's called portfolio optimization. That's just a very classical application. But if you just do a Google search, you'll find a lot of them. And operations research is now it's as well as manufacturing, obviously supply chain and other applications, but definitely in finance and economics as well.
So let me just stop it here. I think we're running out of time here. Just wanted to thank you again, Natalia. That was a very inspiring presentation. I really appreciate that. I think so do our audience. I love the passion, the way you talked about all the different projects. So to me, that's the best indicator.
Thank you. Well, thank you for giving me that space. I really, really appreciate everyone's time. Everyone's so busy and valuable. I really appreciate everyone spending time here with me this afternoon.